In this episode of the podcast, I'm going to show you one of my more recent posts and break down why it's working a little bit better than some of my more recent content. Now, I should say from the outset that my content doesn't go viral. It doesn't really outperform many of the people in my niche, and that's okay because I don't necessarily use my content to try and build the biggest following, to try and get a bunch of viral posts and tons of likes and stuff like that. I use my posts as part of a strategy to drive more leads and sales. And even though it might not look like it does much on the surface, below that, it does consistently grow and build my business. So I want you to first of all park the fact that this hasn't got a million likes or a million views and stuff like that, but look at how it drives a specific lead generating and also sales function. So let's break this down for you right now. First of all, the headline slide is this one on the screen right now. And if you're listening on a podcast, I'll walk you through it anyway. Don't worry about it. It says, Reels you should be making in 2025. And then a subheadline, a breakdown of videos that have generated the most leads for my clients this year. What I'm doing here is trying to appeal to people on many different levels. For example, people in my niche don't really know what they should be posting in order to drive more leads and sales. They know that perhaps Reels are performing quite well at the moment for other people, but when they post Reels, it doesn't really have the same effect. So they're kind of unsure about, okay, you know what? I know what I should be posting, but it's kind of not working. Therefore, me saying these are the Reels you should be making is appealing and solving potentially that pain point of not knowing what type of Reels to post. Adding in 2025 makes it feel more up to date, more relevant, more specific to the here and now, rather than advice that may or may not be still working from, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years ago. Then the subheadline talks about leads. It talks about leads generated for my clients. So again, not only is it pointing towards solving a pain point, it's also pointing towards a desired outcome. And it's also adding an element of social proof by talking about my clients. So in that headline and the subheadline, there is a lot of detail in there that is going to grab attention and specifically set people up to basically perform a specific action. The other thing I should talk about is the aesthetic of the post itself. Now, this is not typically what my content looks like, depending on when you're watching this video or listening to this podcast. What I'm trialing right now is a super simple approach. All you'll see on the headlines of my carousels and the single images are literally black text on a white background and occasionally a black and white image. What I'm trialing here is how simple can you make your content and still drive leads and sales. Again, looking to what my niche wants. They want to be able to create content without spending ages making it, because many of the people that I work with aren't content creators. That's not their profession. They're not graphic designers. They're not video editors. They are coaches. They are nutritionists. They're personal trainers. They're copywriters. They're people whose skills are elsewhere. So if I can create, or I can prove that you can create great content that drives your business forward with the most simplest designs, well, that's quite appealing. So that's why these slides look a little bit sparse. So let's move on to slide 2. I'm not really going into trying to build up anticipation for this post. I really wanted to drive straight into the content. So the second slide is literally the first example, the first format. Now, the other reason why I want to drive people straight to the content is that on Instagram, when you post a carousel, you get 2 shots at an impression in people's feeds. So when Instagram shows it to someone the first time, they show them the first slide. When they show it to them the second time, they show them the second slide. So effectively, you want to create 2 attention-grabbing slides to begin your carousel. But you don't want them to be the same, because that would be boring for someone who's swiping through. Therefore, this second slide is designed to grab people's attention in a different way. So what I've got is 2 examples of this particular post, or it's actually an example on the left where the client Neil has talked about. He's a cycling coach, like nutrition and fitness for cyclists. So it says cycling to lose weight, ? Here's what really works. And then to go alongside that, I've showed the comment section of that post, which has several people commenting his keyword, i.e. he's generating leads. So again, I've shown a format here and I've shown a specific example of it working. So if you were to use this in your own piece of content, then you would look at, okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be a screenshot of a social media post, but the principle is, here's what someone's doing, here's what one of my clients is doing, and here's proof it worked. And that's essentially what you're trying to do here. This is then called the 60-second profit post, and the headline or the sub-headline I've put in here is Neil generated over 4,000 leads in the first 8 months of using this technique. And that's 100% factual. Neil reached out to us and said that since using Creator for the first 8 months, I think he'd gained over about 6,000 followers and generated 4,000 leads in the first 8 months. And he'd almost exclusively used this 60-second profit post technique. And then I've added in a little bit of an action to say, swipe to find out how to use this technique. So I've not tried to cram everything into one slide. It's very easy to read. There's not dense amount of text, but it again keeps creating this desire to swipe through. So not only now have I introduced this particular concept of 4,000 that generated 4,000 leads in 8 months, I'm now telling you to take one more action, i.e. swipe, to find out how that works. So let's swipe through. Then the headline says how to make a 60-second profit post. Now, a 60-second profit post, for those who aren't aware, is a content format that I've created. I mean, I didn't come up with the actual, okay, this is how you put it together. But in terms of putting the component parts together to drive a specific action, that's kind of what I came up with. And it's a 3-step process, and I'm breaking that down. Again, you can apply this to any niche, any particular client example, whether it's something that you're doing in the gym, something you're doing with somebody's nutrition, something you're doing in a marketing situation for copywriting, or whether you're doing web design or whatever. You're breaking down a specific technique that you use and giving it to people in a simple 3 or 4 or 5-step process. So I tell people to write an attention-grabbing headline that specific to the niche, focuses on a pain point, paste the headline over B-roll footage relevant to your niche, blah, 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 blah. The actual detail is not important to what I'm describing, so I won't read through every single thing. The next thing I'm doing is setting up the call to action very early on. So typically, and it's often a great idea, is that you leave the CTA to the very end of a carousel, or the very end of a caption, or the very end of a video. But what I want to do is introduce that CTA much earlier on, because people's attention spans are very, very short these days. If I was therefore to leave it right to the end, then I'm potentially talking to the fewest amount of people possible. If I create intrigue and I create a desire to find out what that CTA is earlier, then potentially I'm speaking to more people by the time that this carousel finishes, or people have finished reading up to the point that they wanted to read to. So I've added in here a screenshot of Creator, that's my AI software, and said that we have a specific tool that generates these 60-second profit posts for you. It's all niche specific. It even writes the captions, and you can check out the last slide to try it for free. Much like the previous 2 slides, I've given people a reason to keep moving through this particular carousel in the actual words that you see on the screen. And that's an important thing. You can, of course, leave people to read whatever you've written on the carousel as the main talking point for that slide, and hope that they continue reading through the story or keep finding the information. But if you want to make that a little bit more certain, keep giving them a reason to swipe. It's much like the copywriting idea that if you're writing an email, each sentence should sell the next sentence. Like, it's always a reason to keep on reading. And it's the same principle with carousels like this. Then I've introduced this second particular format. Again, I'm not going to break down these formats. This is more about the carousel rather than the techniques within the carousel. This then talks about common enemy memes. What you'll see in the headlines is that they are a little bit cryptic. Like, most people won't know what a 60-second profit post is. Most people will understand what a meme is, but they won't understand what a common enemy meme is. And you'll see in the subsequent examples that theme continues. It's creating intrigue, it's creating an open loop, it's giving people a reason to keep reading. And that's one of the common themes you're going to see through this carousel, is that there are multiple things used in each slide to keep you reading. Here we've got an example of one of the actual posts that's being used by this particular client. And then I've used an example of their feed, like all of their reels. And you can see here that there's one that's got 1.2 million views, one that's got 804,000, one that's got 940,000, one that's got 809,000. This is a little bit of social proof to show that this works. Much like I showed you with Neil's post where we had the comments coming in, this is now focused on views. I'm using social proof and the client-specific examples to show you that these techniques work. I've then added more social proof by looking at their subheadline that says, "This simple format helped Martin double his business and gain 150,000 followers in a year. Swipe to find out how to use this technique." We've got, again, intrigue, open loops, we've got social proof, and we've got the compelling reason to keep swiping. And that's what you need in each slide of your carousel. Much like the previous example, we've then broken down what happens, how to target your common enemies. Common enemies help bond your tribe, your ideal clients, with your content and each other. And I show here about, okay, well, what AI tool have I got that could help you create posts like this? I give the example of our chat with creator feature where you can just prompt it and ask it, and it will generate you some ideas. And therefore, I've again said at the bottom there, check out the last slide to try it for free. You can see that there is a pattern. This is just recreating the same examples. Again, if you were maybe using client transformations or something like that, these could be side by side, and you could be talking about a specific technique or a specific approach that helped that client achieve that result. Maybe if it was in a more like marketing context, it might be a financial difference. You say, well, we worked on this technique for this client and it's led to this increase. It's about showing comparison, it's about showing social proof, but also sharing techniques. The third example is Juade, who is here showing how you can challenge your viewers by introducing questions rather than just providing solutions. And I'll come on to that in a second. But again, the same principle is here. I've shown a couple of examples. Now, ideally, these would have the views on them, but I couldn't quite get that. But you can see from the 220 comments on the one on the left-hand side that there is quite a bit of engagement with this one. I've included in the subheadline, again, talking about proof that this technique works. Juade grew his following from under 700 to over 17,000 using this idea in his strategy. The reason why I chose that wording is because we used several different post styles to drive that increased growth in his account. It wasn't just one idea, but this was an integral part of that strategy. And again, swipe to find out how to use this technique. You swipe through and I break that down. So here we're talking about challenging your viewers. Instead of serving up solutions in every post, like just regurgitating some facts and how to do this and how to do that and blah, 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 is we're getting people to think for themselves. We're challenging their knowledge. We're getting them involved in the content. They can tap on the poll options and see if what they're thinking is the correct answer. And if they got it wrong, they can ask questions. If they don't think that you're right, they can challenge you. And you would see from a lot of Juade's content is that people do like to argue in the comments that maybe he's wrong or something like that. But whatever. As long as you believe it to be true, you can start to either educate people or respond to their comments. It's all engagement for your profile. And again, I'm setting up that call to action by showing people how to use chat with Creator, the Creator tool, to think of these types of questions that you can use in your content. But instead of now pointing people towards the last slide where they can find out more about starting a free account or whatever, I've included the exact prompt that I used in the AI tool for this example on the next slide. So I just include that there. So that's a bit of extra value. People could go and swipe that and use it in ChatGPT. That wouldn't necessarily bring back the best responses, because the way we set up Creator is that it knows a lot more about your business and your niche and all of those sorts of things. So the response is more tailored. And plus the fact that we take a full feed from ChatGPT, add our own algorithms on top, specific to marketing and stuff like that. Therefore, that means that this prompt will work better in our tool, Creator, rather than just simply going into ChatGPT. Although you could still get a usable response from ChatGPT using this. The next example, I think this is the final example, is one of my clients, Jason. Again, it's using the exact same process. It's the if then ask. It's a little bit of a cryptic headline designed to create intrigue, to keep attention. A lot of people, marketing, business mentors, whatever, they focus a lot on the initial hook, the initial headline. And that is important, right? If you can't grab people's attention in that first instance, then the rest of the content you created is kind of not worthless, but very few people are going to see it if you didn't grab their attention. But what a lot of people don't think about is how can you continually grab and keep that attention going so that the most people possible get to the point of seeing the call to action. That's the crucial thing, because again, you can create the best headline, the best hook in the world, but if people only therefore watch 2 seconds of your video rather than needing to watch the full 15, then how valuable was that hook? Whereas if you create a video hook or a carousel hook and then back that up with more hooks, open loops, intrigue, value, all of those sorts of things, and pack that post full of interesting stuff, that's what's going to generate you the best possible responses. So here we've got the if then ask intriguing headline. We've got 2 images at the top which basically show the post progression. One is the headline, which is if I was trying to lose weight and getting nowhere, I would rule out being on the wrong calories, ... And then the reveal or the solution is to type calc 4 in the comments to get him to calculate his calories for you using his calorie calculator. I've then again used social proof in the subheadline. Jason used this idea and generated over 1,100 leads in a single month. And now if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify or wherever, you will see there are many different spelling mistakes throughout this particular post. And that's because, not necessarily because I don't care about the spelling, but it's one of those things that I will create these carousels and social media posts at speed. And speed often comes at a detriment to sometimes grammar and spelling. But it's not the type of content that I'm going to fuss over for hours. Like if I was doing a client's email or something like that, or a sales page, I would be, going through every single piece of grammar and spelling with a fine-tooth comb, right? But here, this post, it's, yes, I want to get it right, but if I miss something, I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm sure there's a bunch of people who reach out to me in the DMs and said, you missed this, you spelled that wrong, but I don't really care at the end of the day. We've used, therefore, this subheadline to generate interest. Okay, so what is this technique that generated 1,100 leads in a single month? That's crazy, right? So swipe to find out how he used this technique. Again, we've recaptured attention and kept people swiping through. The if then, we won't go into the details of the technique. Go check out the post on social media if you want to kind of read through it all. The more important thing is I've broken down the technique and then again reintroduce the CTA, which is creator, and we have a specific hook generator tool which you can select from a drop down menu the type of marketing trigger that you want to use. So if it is a pain point, or you want to use authority, or you want to speak to beginners, or you want to talk about FOMO, or whatever it is, then there are marketing triggers you can select to create a headline or a hook that reads a little bit like the one that Jason used in this particular post that I'm using as a description. And then the final slide is the main call to action slide, where I've kept it super simple. It's kind of following a little bit of like a David Ogilvy style from way back when, although it's just a little bit of a different layout. So that technique that David Ogilvy would use in print would be a picture, a caption for the picture, and I think the headline above the picture actually should be a headline above the picture, then the picture, then a caption, then your first line of copy, right? That would kind of be what he would do. What I've done here is I've used the name of the tool at the top, which is Creator, a headline of 18 custom AI tools that help companies of one create content that turns posts into profits. Then I've added a picture of the tool, a little bit of a description, almost like a picture caption of saying the email storyteller helps you write email stories using our proprietary formula, and then a CTA, which is comment creator 7 to start a 7-day trial. Now, I'm making this post a couple of hours after, or making this podcast a couple of hours after posting this particular thing. So at the moment, 1 lead. I'm expecting that to increase. But in terms of actual engagement with the content itself and views and impressions and stuff like that, it's performed a little bit better than my more recent content. But again, remember, I'm not really focused on views, reach, likes, that sort of stuff. I set up my business slightly differently to use social media, not necessarily as like this particular post has to perform well, but more so like the volume of content that people consume over time is what sells people into my business. Plus the fact I run ads at the same time, which keeps my email list growing and growing and growing. So the content for me is supplementary to other ways in which I grow my business. It has this more sort of like halo effect of showing that I have credible ideas and I am running a credible business and stuff like that, right? So don't focus too much on those metrics, because at the end of the day, metrics like views and reach and all those sorts of things, yes, they are important. I'm not saying for 1 second that they're not important, but they are metrics that matter to Instagram, Facebook, and Meta in general more than they have a direct impact on your business. Yes, if you've got a massive audience of the right people, when you go to sell something, you're going to probably sell a lot of it. But it doesn't always translate that way. Views and followers aren't necessarily meaningful views and meaningful followers who are actually going to buy something. Let's take an example, right? A view on Instagram right now, it may change in the future how they define it, is 1 millisecond of viewing time. Now, I think from memory, a blink of an eye is 100 milliseconds. So 1 millisecond is such a small amount of time to register a view. So let's say, for example, that I made a reel and it got 1 million views. Are they 1 million views that are quality views, i.e. longer than a millisecond? Or am I just getting these fleeting views that really don't matter? People aren't taking that content in. So you have to kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, are the views and the reach, are they serving me and my business? Or are they just keeping people on the platform, feeding my ego and my addiction so that Instagram and Facebook get what they want? But am I getting what I want for my business? That's the crucial thing. And what I tell my clients is that don't necessarily obsess over every single post on an individual basis. Look at what happened to your business over the course of a month. So over the course of a month, did your revenue increase? Did you book more sales calls? Did you make more sales directly from your website? Did you get an increase in email subscribers? Are your followers not necessarily sort of blowing up by the 1,000 per day, but are they steadily increasing? And all of these sorts of things. And if the answer to those questions are, it's not really moving forward, well, then think about doing something different with your content. But if the business is continuing to grow on the metrics that matter to you, even if your posts aren't going viral, even if you're not getting tons of likes and views and reach and stuff like that, then it might be a sign that actually your content is performing well. It's just not performing well versus the metrics that matter to Meta, but versus your metrics that matter to your business, it's performing very, very well. So just be cautious of that. But anyway, I digress. This is how this post was constructed and the reasons why it's potentially working better for me right now. If you are interested in checking out Creator, which is featured heavily in this particular post, I'll put a link in the description of the podcast. You can go check it out. And also, if you want to find out more about how potentially I can help you get more from your social media content and your email marketing, I will put a link into my Social Mavericks Patreon where you can sign up for free and get access to a ton of free content. Also, there's a free community in there as well, so you can ask me a bunch of questions. But you can also check out the monthly Social Mavericks newsletter and some of the other courses and things that we have available there. But for right now, I'll say thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.